friends, I'm Kyla and this is the Infinite Library. So today is going to be one of the first little video projects that I do on this channel, and so The Worst Witch Books was a series which I read time and time again when I was in primary school and in my early teens. I absolutely adored them and wanted so badly to go join the witches' school. I even dressed up as Mildred Hubble one year for World Book Day, complete with a broomstick. After Harry Potter's fall from grace, it's so easy to feel a sense of anxiety over magical school stories, and for a time I found it hard to associate them with anything but that and J.K. Turfling. But then I remembered an older series which had been so near and dear to my heart in the Worst Witch series by Jill Murphy. The books were aimed at middle grade and tell the tales of a very unlucky witch called Mildred Hubble, who goes to St. Cackle's Academy of Witches with her friends Maud, Enid, and her tabby cat. She gets into lots of scrapes, but generally manages to save the day. And I found these books so charming and hilarious. Mildred isn't really your typical heroine. She messes up a lot. She exasperates everyone around her, and particularly when engaging with the class's golden girl and bully, Ethel. She can even be mean at times. But despite everything, she always has good intentions, even if things don't necessarily go quite as planned. And she keeps trying and trying, despite everyone seeing her as being one of the worst witches of her age. Jill Murphy's friend and agent, Pamela Todd, said that the book's power comes from their message. Friendship counts for much. Bullies have backstories. Anything is possible. Don't be put off. Don't be knocked down. There's magic in the everyday, and imagination can transform ordinary lives. The books are beautifully illustrated throughout by author Jill Murphy, who wrote and published the 8 books in the series between the years of 1974 and 2018, before the author sadly died at the age of 72. Her books were so popular, they even got multiple adaptations. First, a made-for-TV movie in 1986, starring, of all people, Tim Curry, and also Diana Rigg and Fariza Balk. Yeah, her. She's in The Craft, funnily enough, so witchy stuff is kind of her territory. There was even a musical stage production and a whole bunch of TV shows. Jill Murphy was a British author, and the books very much depict that type of humour and pay homage to old school boarding schools. She started writing the first book in the series while she was still at school at age 15, a school itself which was a strict academic convent, and many of the people she met there, both friends and teachers, influenced the characters she created in the Worst Witch series. She initially received rejection letters from publishers who said children would be frightened about a school for witches, particularly one which didn't shy away from depicting the school as a dark and murky place. This is much more your Scholomance than your Hogwarts. She finally managed to find a publisher in Allison and Busby, who Jill said she was thrilled to find the publishers were quirky, like me, and the book was published, selling out within 2 months of publication. She went on to write a bunch of other picture books as well for children, along with the Worst Witch series. I've been feeling super nostalgic for this series recently, so I decided, with it being Halloween month and all, that I'd reread them, and I'd take you along with me. I'm planning for this to be kind of the start of a little series of vlogs where I revisit old favourites of mine and see if they still hold up. So, the book covers I have now are newer variants and not the ones I grew up with. I much prefer the older one, so I'm going to show the cover differences whilst I go over each of the 8 books briefly before I start my actual reread. So I have the collected works of them all. There are 8 books in the series. I've actually only read, I think, the first 6. I don't think I ever managed to read the last 2. I think they came out a little bit later and I'd kind of stopped reading middle grade at that point in time. I will go through them briefly, and I will show on the side what the covers that I grew up with was, because I much prefer my covers. I'll be honest, they were very atmospheric with these kind of black silhouettes. I love Jill Murphy's artwork in this, like just flicking through them now, it just brings me so much joy to see the pictures that she kind of drew and the imagination she had. So they put those on the covers in these ones, which I like, but I just really prefer the atmosphere of the old ones. So, the first book in the series, we have The Worst Witch. And we have The Worst Witch Strikes Again. A Bad Spell for the Worst Witch. This one was always my favourite. It's probably the longest one as well, even though it doesn't look that long now. Now that I've read so much more chunky books, but this is the longest one. The Worst Witch, All at Sea. The Worst Witch Saves the Day. Worst Witch to the Rescue. The Worst Witch and the Wishing Star. And finally, first prize for The Worst Witch. So, I'm going to take you with me as I reread this series. I'm also going to check out some of the adaptations. I think I may have seen the film a long time ago, but I don't remember it, so I actually managed to find a copy of the film. You can tell how 80s it is just from the cover, but I'm going to watch this. And I'm also going to watch a little bit of the old TV series, because I remember I loved the 90s series. I used to watch it all the time when I was younger. I've not really seen many of the other series. I think I saw the spin-off series from the first Worst Witch, where it was kind of like her cousin that also came, and I didn't like it as much. I'm going to watch a little bit of that, take you with me. So, without further ado, let's get this going. Hello! Okay, so it's later the same day. I have finished the first Worst Witch book. It's very short, and yeah, oh my gosh, the nostalgia from this. It was so good. There's really not a lot that happens in this first book. Like, I'd actually forgotten the whole, like, subplot with Mildred, like, messing things up and then being in trouble. And then she kind of tries to run away, and she basically finds this like threat in the forest and ends up saving the school basically because of that. Like, it's a very young kind of plot, like a very plot device kind of thing, but just this was so cute to reread this, and I'd forgotten, like, the pictures are just so cute and so nostalgic, like, just it's so good. And yeah, I think I liked Mildred more on reading this than I did the first time around, and obviously Miss Hardbroom is an actual boss. So yeah, I really enjoyed my little reread of this. I am going to be moving on to the next book now, The Worst Witch Strikes Again. I think this was one I wasn't majorly keen on back when I read this when I was younger, but I'm interested to see if I like it a little bit more now. So yeah, that is my update so far. Also, look how cute the cat is. And I thought that Tabby was in it so much more in the first book, but he's really not. He's like barely does anything and is just kind of there to be like another thing that Mildred's messed up on, essentially. So that was a shame, but I know we are going to get more of the kitty in the next books. So yeah, I'll probably give this a high 3, I suppose. It wasn't anything spectacular, but I just had a really good time with it. So yeah, that was the first book. Hello, so I'm updating you because I finished the second book in the series. I completely forgot everything that happened in this book, to be honest, other than that there was a monkey who was a menace that I only knew about because it was on the front cover. But yeah, I forgot this was the first book that Enid shows up in. So Enid is one of Mildred's other friends. She's kind of like a prankster, basically, and she gets Mildred into more trouble, and that's kind of what happens in this book. I remember this not being one of my favourites, and I think I would still have to say that's kind of the case. With this one, there just wasn't really a lot going on. Maud isn't even really there for most of the book because her and Mildred have had a falling out. Mostly because she's jealous that Mildred is spending time with Enid. Yeah, it was just kind of fine. It wasn't anything super exciting in this one, but it had a cute ending. There were some really good moments in it, such as Enid just being hilarious. I'd forgotten how funny she was. Poor Mildred just trying her best to get through the year without being expelled when Enid is just making things very hard for her. But yeah, essentially in this one, this is the books are split into terms. So the first book was kind of like the autumn turn, and this is a summer turn, so they get to wear these like checkered dresses, which are very much like the summer dresses that we would wear in primary school. And I remember really loving these dresses, although in the book it says it's very dreary. But I remember that I really liked these dresses and thought they were super cute when I first read it. So that is the second book. Definitely didn't enjoy it as much as the first one, I don't think. So now we're going to be moving into the third book, A Bad Spell for the Worst Witch. And I don't remember anything either that happens in this book, to be honest. Over that, there is an incident with a bucket of water that I think goes over somebody. What does it say? It says, Mildred is determined to lose her embarrassing reputation as the worst witch Miss Cackle's Academy has ever seen, but things rapidly get out of hand. So this is kind of like the winter term again. And yeah, I guess I'll find out what it's about because I don't remember anything. Hello, checking in because I finished A Bad Spell for the Worst Witch. I again didn't remember much about the premise for this one until I started reading it, and then I remember that this is the one where she gets turned into a frog by Ethel, and she ends up getting into a whole bunch of scrapes while she's trying to get turned back into herself, and she also ends up meeting another frog in the lake who turns out is also somebody who got transformed. This one was really charming. I really liked it. Much better than the second book, honestly. It introduces this like new character in it with the person who's changed into a frog, and their relationship was super cute. There was more Ethel and Mildred sort of grumblings in this one. I really don't remember if the two ever actually managed to put aside their differences and become friends. I kind of wish they would. I feel like Ethel could use a friend. I never seem to see with anybody in these books, which makes me a bit worried for her, honestly. But yeah, it was a really good one. So now I get to go on to my favourite book. My favourite that I was when I was young, anyway. So I'm very excited to do that one. Next, I get to go on to The Worst Witch All at Sea, which was my favourite one, mostly because I know this one is all about the school going on a trip to the seaside, and I just really loved that whole thing. It was like a field trip at school. So yeah, this is my next one. It is the longest one in the series, but it's about 200 pages, so it's not massively long. So yeah, I'm really excited I think this is the one I've probably been the most excited to reread because I want to see if it still kind of holds up as being one of my favourites. So I finished The Worst Witch All at Sea yesterday, and it's definitely still my favourite of the series. Like, I loved this one so much. It's actually got a really nice little storyline that really tugs at the heartstrings about how basically they've suddenly decided that Mildred's little tabby cat is too much of a nuisance and is holding Mildred back. So they take away her tabby cat, put him in the kitchens, and give her a black cat instead. and she's absolutely distraught about this. And they go away on holiday, thanks to the wizard who Mildred rescued in the previous book, away to the seaside, and she sneaks Tabby along and to try and, like, you know, just get some time with him again. And then some incidents happen, which means that Miss Harbroom gets in trouble and Mildred has to kind of help her. And yeah, I just really liked this one. I remember this being one of the ones that made me start to like Miss Harbroom, with her almost kind of being in this like vulnerable position for once. Just some small things as well. She's so funny in this book. Like, she's always like so mean to Mildred, but I love the moment where she's just kind of like relaxing in the sun for the first time and she's actually in a good mood for once. And you get to see some things about her that we never saw that really humanizes her a little bit. Like how she really, like her cat, and how her broom is like really protective of her. And yeah, it was just a really nice one. This is, I'd probably rate it about 4. Definitely my favourite of the lot so far. It might end up being my favourite, which wouldn't surprise me, but I am excited to see what some of the books are that I've not read. So the next book is the last one I think I've actually read before, which is The Worst Witch Saves the Day. And I think I only ever read it once. Like, I reread the first 4 many times, and then this one came out a little bit later, and I was sort of just not so bothered anymore about the series, and I just didn't like this one very much. I don't remember anything again about what it's about. Apparently, she has a new form teacher who's really weird, so there's going to be a new character. I guess I'll check in once I've read it and let you know if I still don't like it. Okay, so I'm halfway through this book, and honestly, I think this is the meanest I've ever seen Ethel be. Usually, when she kind of like pulls her little pranks and stuff, they're not really supposed to be any more than pranks, and she always tries to keep it secret. But in this one, she just outright goes and just cuts Mildred's hair, which was unexpected. She's usually not so completely outward about her malicious intent. And then later on, it's like it's really clearly obvious that she's just trying to mess with Mildred even more. And of course, Mildred still falls for it because, as the author says, like, Mildred is too naive, and she keeps just expecting that one day Ethel is actually going to mean being nice when she says that she's trying to help, and it never works. And I kind of get that, because you kind of do want Ethel to finally just accept Mildred and try and be friends with her, but so far she is still just as much of a bitch as she is in every book, perhaps more so, because you don't mess with someone's hair. Update. Ethel got worse. Not only is she responsible for traumatizing Mildred's poor cat Tabby by doing the whole thing with the hair growth anyway, now she's literally just taken Tabby away from Mildred, saying that the cat needs to learn how to fly. Just forcibly taken the poor cat, put it onto her broomstick, and just flown off with it. So I guess we can add kidnapping to the list of crimes that Ethel has done in this book. Okay, so I finished it. I actually really enjoyed this one. I didn't think I was going to. I think if I had read this one before, I didn't really click with it, but it was still kind of fun. Miss Harbroom had some great moments in it, and of course, the new form teacher was actually Agatha in disguise, trying to do the exact same thing that she tried to do back in book 1. So the repeat of the storyline was a little unfortunate, but thankfully it only came in right at the end. But at least it was more built up with her being a teacher for like most of the book and being there at least, whereas in the first book it was very tacked on. I didn't hate that. It had some pretty fun moments. Mildred turned herself into an ant and then had to spell a message out to Maud and Enid because with ink, because she'd forgotten what she was supposed to be doing and she couldn't remember how to turn herself back, which really just reminds me of when in D&D people get polymorphed into animals and you basically take the intelligence of the animal, and that's essentially what happened to Mildred as an Anne, because she just completely lost touch with what she was doing. But yeah, I had some good moments. It had a very cute ending with Miss Harbroom kind of becoming their form teacher again and them actually being happy about it, and Miss Harbroom being happy about it. So that was sweet to see. And then she got to finally rest with her little tubby cat at the end. So yeah, it's probably still a 3-star. It doesn't quite make it to what the 4th book was, but I still enjoyed it, Ethel aside. So the next one is The Worst Witch to the Rescue, and this one apparently is about some kind of holiday project she's done that she thinks people will be impressed by, but Ethel is being friendly to her, which, as we all know, at least from the book that just happened, is a recipe for disaster. So yeah, we'll see exactly how disastrous that's going to be. Will this be Ethel's redemption arc? Probably not. Hello. Forgive the horrendous lighting. It is quite late at night, but I put some Halloween decorations up, so I figured it would make a nice and appropriate backdrop as I talk about the next book that I just read, The Worst Witch to the Rescue, in which Ethel's war crimes got even worse. She's now also doing more pet kidnapping, including almost killing said pet, stealing work from someone else, passing it off as her own, and just causing more mayhem, basically. I'm not looking forward to see what she does next, because I don't for a second think that she's going to stop behaving herself in next book. Anyway, this one was quite cute. This was one of the first ones I had never read, so it was nice to kind of like go into this completely blind. But basically in this one, Mildred sort of like, they've all done these holiday projects, and Mildred's come up with this idea of that she's managed to make work in a new spell where she can make animals talk for a time. And she's done it on a turtle who she's kind of brought with her, and then on the way to school she has a run-in with Ethel, and Ethel, pretending to be really nice, ends up stealing the spell from Mildred and passing it off as her own, and Mildred ends up getting in trouble because she obviously tries to call her out on it and no one believes her. However, her turtle does speak and was there at the time, so Ethel realises that the turtle has seen too much and must be got rid of, at least until the spell breaks. And I felt really bad for the poor turtle. He wasn't my favourite character or anything, but putting a turtle on the top of a very tall tree in the middle of a storm where he could likely fall out and die is not Ethel's finest moment. So yeah, this one was still probably about 3. It wasn't amazing or anything, but I still quite enjoyed it. And I'm going on to the next one now. I'm getting close to the end. Hello, checking in because I finished the second to last book in the series, The Worst Witch and the Wishing Star. I actually took a break for a couple of days from reading these. I was starting to feel a little bit burnt out, and I just wasn't really in the mood for the very kind of low stakes atmosphere that kind of comes with this being a lower middle grade book. So I took a break for a couple of days and then went back to it last night. And yeah, this one's definitely not one of my favourites. It kind of repeats some storylines that we've had already. So yet again, we have sort of Mildred trying to cover up something, another animal in this case. So basically at the start of the book, they've just started the new term. They've all been given like little jobs and stuff to sort of make them be a bit more involved in the school. And there happens to be a shooting star that night, and both Miss Hardbroom and Mildred wish on the shooting star, and what Mildred wishes for is to have a dog. She didn't really expect it to come true straight away, but then lo and behold, a little dog appears at the gates the next day, is absolutely in love with her, and more impressively, it seems to completely take to, like, her life completely. It loves being on a broomstick, as you can see here. It kind of ends up being able to do lots of tricks with her, much better than poor Tabby, who, as we all know, can't stand being on a broomstick, bless him. It basically is like a lot of the book is her just kind of trying to cover up the fact that she's now got a dog, as well as a cat, as well as a tortoise. She does manage to succeed for quite a while, but then of course Ethel finds out, as Ethel does. She ends up causing a ruckus and there is a big disaster that happens. In the end, the only thing that can kind of save the day is Mildred and her little dog, sort of with his newfound athletics on a broomstick, essentially. So it definitely wasn't a very high stakes one. It was cute. I liked the new animal who was in it. I felt sorry for poor Tabby at first, who was not happy about there being a dog sharing his living space. But yeah, it was fine. I'd give it probably about 3. Definitely didn't rate it as high as the others, but it was a cute story. And Miss Harbroom had some really sweet moments, shockingly. Like, she kind of reveals later on that, she reveals a little bit about her past, and about how basically she's clearly come from this very strict upbringing, and it kind of makes a lot of sense for her. And then she's like having a discussion with the other teachers about birthdays and stuff, and she's talking about how she never really got very much of her birthday. And then the other teachers are the ones that kind of persuade her to wish from the wishing star. And she actually wishes for the school to win in this competition that is kind of the focal point of this book. And yeah, she just had some really sweet moments, particularly towards the end when she kind of like shows up and she's like brought this big cake with candles and she's like, it's my birthday. So yeah, that was really sweet. There's not much more to say about it. It was just kind of cute. It wasn't really a standout for me. So that does mean that I'm finally on the last book in the series, which is, let me go find it, is First Prize for the Worst Witch. So this one, I believe, is either going to be taking place in her last year of school or close to it. And it is essentially supposed to be a full circle, hopefully, I'd imagine, from what I can tell, is that she will no longer be known as the Worst Witch, and she'll kind of end up being respected. Basically, in the premise for this, it says she's got her sights set on winning the school's highest honour, to be head girl, which of course means it's going to put her right up against Ethel. So I imagine those two are going to be having one more little face-off against each other. Will Ethel be redeemed? I doubt it at this point. She's so far just been extremely impossible and really unlikable. So yeah, final book. I will check in with my thoughts once I've read it. And then I'll do a final ranking of all the books and where I think they kind of stand from worst to best, in my opinion. So, I did it. I finally finished the Worst Witch series with First Prize for the Worst Witch. I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap-up afterwards, but to now just give you a little quick review of sorts about this one. It had a very cute ending. I was very happy with the ending, but to be honest, I felt like this book, weirdly of all the books to say they're middle grade, this is the one that really felt like it was kind of written for a young reader. I kind of feel like a lot of like the other books, the jokes still kind of stand up, and even though it's written quite simply, it never feels like it's really pandering to you as a reader. But I kind of felt this one did. It felt very much just like something that was a little storybook for kids, which is a shame. It's just in the story, really. Basically, in it, Mildred's dog Star, they find out that he's from a circus, and then the circus people come and take him back. And Mildred is, of course, very upset because she loves him as she loves all her animals. So they go to the circus and find out that the animals are kind of not really been keeping very well. They've not been kept very well. There's also a seal and a horse. And she basically spends most of the book coming up with like a solution to rescue them, along with her friends Maud and Enid. I like that they got involved because often they don't. It's just Mildred, but she was kind of doing her usual thing of like sneaking off alone and doing things that she shouldn't be doing. And it was all just a little too convenient how it all kind of tied it up in the end. So yeah, I wasn't really keen on the main story. I did really like the ending, particularly one last good moment for Miss Hardroom, But yeah, that is officially the last book in the series. Funnily enough, this book finishes with Mildred about to go into her final year. So I guess we never saw her final year at the academy, but it did end on a nice note. So yeah, not the worst, but probably one of my least favourites, I think. So now that I've read all 8 of the Worst Witch books, I'm going to do a little bit of a ranking just to see where I kind of think they fall. I think for me, I found that there was a very definite, like, these are my favourites, these are my least favourites, and all the others were kind of mixed up in the middle. And I feel like they could kind of change depending on my mood when I reread them. So the ranking then goes at the very bottom is The Worst Witch Strikes Again. I just didn't really enjoy this one. I don't like the monkey subplot. And even though this introduces Enid, I don't think it's the best introduction, honestly. To the point that I had forgot going into this book that Enid was even introduced in this book, which is a shame because she's a good character. So this is the second book in the series, but yeah, I would rate this as the worst, honestly. So that one goes right at the bottom. Next, I would put the very last book in the series, First Prize for the Worst Witch. This wasn't bad, but there was just a lot of different plot holes, and I just didn't necessarily love the whole subplot with the circus, and I didn't really enjoy where that went. I did like the ending, and I thought it was a good ending overall to the series, but there was just a lot of stuff that I didn't like. Again, Ethel was just being infuriating, so I would rate that above that one. So I think rating wise, I gave this one like a 2.75, and this is about similar, but I would rate this slightly higher. Next, with we're going into like the free ratings now, I suppose. I would go with The Worst Witch Saves the Day. This one just doesn't really stand out for me that much. It's not bad. I'm actually having to re-look at it because I do not remember what happens. Oh, this is the one with the Miss Cackle, like her sister comes back, basically. And it just rehashed the story again and from the very first book. And I just wasn't crazy on it, essentially. So yeah, this one is my next one. Then another 3, it's The Worst Witch and The Wishing Star. And now we're getting into the ones I actually really quite enjoy. I think these are kind of like the ones that are at the bottom. And now we're getting into the ones that are really good. And I really did like this one. It had some really sweet moments, both for the main characters, Mildred and her friends, and also for Miss Hardbroom, which is always nice. I love there being some Miss Hardbroom humanizing moments. And this is the one that introduces the dog. I don't like how she kind of hides the dog away. That does infuriate me, but otherwise I like that this is kind of like Mildred is getting more mature, she's starting to get responsibilities. And yeah, I just like this one a decent amount. It wasn't up there in my top, but I had a good time with it. Next, then, is the third book in the series, A Bad Spell for the Worst Witch. And I think the only thing really that makes this stand out for me is that it introduces the character of the other male wizard, who is obviously really important in the fourth book of the series, Mr. Algernon Webb or something. Because essentially in this one, Mildred gets turned into a frog and she ends up making friends with another frog and finds out that he's actually a wizard who has been transformed many years ago. And she helps him be free, essentially. And it has such a cute ending with them all sort of going off together to have like afternoon tea together. And yeah, I have a lot of nostalgia, and I don't think the beginning of it is that amazing. It's very typical Worst Witch, but I like where it went. So that one is my next one in the list. So we're on to the last 3. So the next one is The Worst Witch to the Rescue. This is the one with the turtle, and I really enjoyed the character of Einstein, the turtle, in this. I liked where it went. It has, unfortunately, the worst cases of Ethel being horrific of all the books, I think, but it also has some of the best of Mildred. I think, in this book. So I liked it. It's one of the longer ones again, so it has a little bit more space to breathe. And it's also nice because this is, I think, one of the books where we get to actually see Mildred be successful. The whole plot is basically kicked off by the fact that Mildred has actually done something brilliant and intelligent for once, and Ethel can't stand it, so she has to sabotage her, essentially, and she does it in a really horrible way. So it's nice that this is kind of a case of Mildred is definitely in the right in this book, and she was in the right all along, and so yeah, this is why this kind of makes it to my top 3. So my second one is the original Worst Witch book. I just have so much nostalgia for this. I know it practically word for word. I was reading it through and I just knew exactly what everyone was going to say. It's that kind of book that I read it so much. So it's wholly nostalgia. Story-wise, it's probably not the best or the strongest, but I just have so much love for this. And it's such a lovely introduction to the world and to the characters. So that's why that makes it to second. And then at the very top, as it was back when I was young and I read it, it's still the Worst Witch. Oh, let's see. This is still my favourite, and I'm really happy that it's still my favourite. I have so much love for this book. I love the whole we're going away for a summer break thing. I like the storyline with Miss Harbroom having to get rescued by Mildred. The whole thing with them being out in the sea for a while. And there's just some great moments. And I kind of was worried going into rereading this one that I would kind of have lost the joy that I felt reading this one specific. But I'm really happy that this is definitely still my favourite. So yeah, that is my ranking, I guess, of them all. We're going from sort of like a mid 2 at the bottom here to the 3s, and then this one is kind of like a 4 at the top here. So yeah, that is my overall ranking for the Worst Witch series, and I'm pretty happy with that, honestly. I watched the old 1980s Worst Witch movie the other night, and my gosh, it was not good. I was kind of going into it not expecting a lot because the front cover looked very low budget. It looked extremely 80s, and I love 80s movies, but this looked like the really kind of bad, cheap kind of 80s. And yeah, it was awful. It was also kind of a musical, which I was not at all expecting. But yeah, it was very like cheap effects, lots of really like bad green screen, very camp, very over dramatic. Funnily enough, the best actors in the film were the child actors who were playing the people who were playing Mildred. Funnily enough, I don't know how to say her name, but Farisa Balk from The Craft, one of her earliest roles as a child actor, she did Mildred Hubble in this. The other kids were actually not too bad either. The kid that played Ethel was way over the top, but nowhere near as over the top as the actress who played Agatha, who was Miss Cackle's sister. She looked absolutely ridiculous. Like, this is how she looked in it. I appreciate they tried to like just make her look a little bit different, but she was just so funny, and I could kind of get away with like what her fashion was because I love that it was so colourful and so like trashy. But then she started singing and it was so bad. It was this awful, like really badly written villain song. So yeah, I just could not take it seriously, and that's probably the point. But I couldn't even take it seriously in like a good way. Diana Rigg played Miss Hardbroom, and she was also just so over the top. Like, some of the scenes that she was in were just ridiculous, and she didn't come across as scary to me. She just came across as just ridiculous, essentially. Also, Tim Curry is in this movie. Probably a highlight for me, just because it's Tim Curry and everything he goes into, he just puts so much of himself into it, and it was very clear in this role. He kind of played the Grand High Wizard, and he had a rainbow cape, he looked fabulous, he sang. It was not a good song, it had the worst special effects in the whole movie, but it was at least fun to see. So check that out on YouTube, I guess, if you're interested in seeing like his Halloween themed song. that he sang for this movie. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend this, I don't think, unless you really do just want something that is gonna be just like bad movie, essentially. I also watched some of the TV shows, and I have a lot of nostalgia for the original like 90s Worst Witch show, and I still really like it. You know, I watched that first episode again, and whilst it definitely does kind of fall into that old 90s TV, I think it honestly does still hold up a little bit. And I don't think that's just the nostalgia talking, because that was the Worst Witch TV show that I watched. So, as well as that one, there's also another one which was kind of like set afterwards, which was kind of based around her cousin. I wasn't huge on that one, I kind of stopped watching around that time. And then recently they've done this Netflix adaptation of it, and I didn't get around to watching that, but I might give it a go. But I watched the trailer and it doesn't quite have the vibe that I want from it. So I'm not expecting big things from it, honestly. So it's a shame. But yeah, the Worst Witch movie is a time and not a good time, sadly. So that's all I have to say about that one. Whilst I was reading these, it did kind of bring to mind other things that I kind of wanted to sort of just say, like, oh, if you liked this and you kind of wanted something similar, why not try this? I don't actually have very much in the way of books for this. In terms of books with magical schools, there are a lot of them out there. I'm mostly familiar with the ones that are kind of like the YA kind of schools, and they just don't have the same kind of vibe as we get with the Worst Witch middle grade. So if you do have any ideas of those, please jot them down in the comments, because I'd be really interested to see if there are other series that are kind of similar to this. But what I am going to be recommending is some shows and some films that I think kind of, if you are kind of wanting that fun vibe that the Worst Witch series has, it kind of has that similar idea. So first thing that I would be recommending is Disney's The Owl House. This is a series which is based all around this Latina girl called Luz. She's supposed to be going away to a summer camp, and she ends up accidentally falling through into this crazy, quite dark fantasy land instead, and she ends up being looked after by a witch there inside this crazy house. And the whole story is about her sort of figuring out where she belongs. She ends up joining a magic school as well. She makes a couple of friends there at that magic school. It's also got some beautiful LGBT representation, and it's just a lovely series. It's honestly so wholesome, and I would highly recommend it. It's just ended, unfortunately. They had to kind of rush the final season because Disney just didn't really want to fund it because of probably the LGBT representation. But I honestly cannot yell about it how much. It's such a good series. Other things I would recommend, Charmed, I think, is obviously for a higher age range than what the Worst Witch is, but it kind of does have that whole, we're having adventures of the week, we've got a group of close friends, sisters in this case. It kind of, again, it fits into that whole sort of 90s era fantasy that I think has that kind of vibe that Worst Witch gives off. On a similar vein, I would also recommend The Craft. This is definitely a much darker witch take, but I think again it has that kind of 90s witchiness, which I would kind of would see it as like, oh, this is the Worst Witch if it was all grown up, and that's kind of how I see with The Craft. My other recommendations are anime, actually. Probably the strongest similarity in terms of series is Little Witch Academia. This is 2 movies and a TV series, and much like Mildred Hubble, it deals with a young witch called Akko who is unfortunately not very good at witchcraft. She messes up all the time, she's extremely clumsy. She also has 2 slightly more capable friends who help her out. There's also a kind of like a school villain bully called Diana, who is similar to Ethel, but I would say has a much better character arc, something we were sadly missing of Ethel. And yeah, it has a lot of similarities. It has, again, that very same vibe that you kind of get from reading the Worst Witch series. It's not super dark, and it's just a good time of a series, essentially. And the last one I would recommend is Kiki's Delivery Service, which is about a witch who ends up sort of making deliveries in this town, and she's kind of struggling with being a witch with her powers, trying to fly, that kind of thing. So again, it gives me those kind of like Mildred Hubble aspects. So yeah, those would be some recommendations of things that kind of have the same vibes as the Worst Witch series. If there's anything else you can think of, please feel free to note it down in the comments, because I really like the series and I'd love to find things that are kind of similar to it in the future for me to check out. So I really enjoyed this kind of process of rereading this series. I really want to kind of do this for other series of mine that I loved years back and just kind of see if it holds up. And this doesn't necessarily hold up all the way through. I can see why I never ended up reading those later books in the series, because I feel like they are definitely, they kind of lose a little bit of that joy that I think it had in the beginning. But overall, I think this series does still have a special place in my heart. There are still, I would definitely reread at least some of these again in the future. I would probably rewatch some of the TV shows, honestly, not the movie. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing this. It was really nice to do this over the Halloween month to kind of get into the mood for it. And yeah, I look forward to doing more of these in the future, and I hope if you stuck around for all of this video that you'll maybe stick around to see what other ones I do. So with that being said, thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Commencing cat extraction. Here she is. Oh, I know. Hi friends! This is Kyla, and welcome to the Infinite Library. Yes, I know, she doesn't like being picked up. This is my friend's cat. I'm pet sitting her at the moment, which seems very suitable because she's a gorgeous black cat. Alright. Must you complain so?